Hi, Buena Vista third graders. I miss you so much, and I am so excited to see you this week for our first true week of online learning. I hope you guys have had a wonderful time so far. You've been able to see the YouTube videos, you're able to get connected on Schoology and all of those things. Remember, if you have any questions or your parents have questions, to please reach out to me. As you can see, I have a pretty bad boo-boo. I cut my finger really badly while cooking last night. So there it is. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce some vocabulary, and I am going to do a read aloud. And then we're going to be thinking about the main idea. So this is a total main idea review. We're going to be thinking about the main idea of the story. What's the big picture? If you had to walk away from the story and tell me one thing that is about the whole story, what would it be? Okay, so guys, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull up my desktop screen. Excuse us for just a moment while we get things going. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to talk about our I can statement for the first half of our lesson. So today, I can identify new and unfamiliar vocabulary about living things and their habitats. The first word you're going to see today is the word ecology, the study of relationships between living things and their environments. And as you can see in the picture, I have put a picture to help you kind of understand what ecology means. Number two, this is a word I know that you guys have seen before, environment. It's your environments, the area around you and your natural surroundings. So right now, my environment is in my home. I'm in my kitchen. Ecosystem, everything in a particular environment, both living and non-living. And in the picture, she spies ecosystems. We see grasslands, we see deserts, we see rainforest, we see other forests, all different kinds of ecosystems that we're going to talk about today. And we all also know this word, organism, a living thing. Any living thing is an organism. Me, you, this koala, this frog, plants, animals, anything like that. That's an organism. It's a living thing. To depend on. We're going to talk a lot today about how things in their environment depend on other things in their environment. And that means to rely on or need. And you can see in this picture, this baby elephant depends on its mother for survival. And of course, that word, survival. The ability to continue living. We need food, water, and sunlight for survival. I wonder what some of the other animals and living things that we're going to talk about today depend on for their survival. Pollen. I want you to take 3 seconds and think about all that yellow stuff on your cars right now. Makes you sneeze, your eyes itch. That's actually pollen. It's a yellow substance. It's made by plants, and it's carried to other plants of the same kind to make seeds. Skitter. When I think of the word skitter, I think about something skittering across the street, to move quickly across something. The bug skittered across the ground to avoid being stepped on. We're going to talk about how bugs skitter and other things skitter today. A sprout, to begin to grow. So while I'm pulling up our read aloud, I want you guys to think about those words. Which words did you already know? And which words were new and unfamiliar to you? Now remember what we talked about all year long. Really important words are going to be what? Bolded. And all of the words we just talked about are going to be bolded in our text. I'm going to stop. I might talk about those words. I might ask you some questions. I might tell you to pause or just kind of answer out loud and pretend like you're with me, okay? Make sure if I ask you a question, you answer it in the comment box if you're on Schoology in the discussion board. Living things and their habitats. Use your finger to follow along while I read out loud. Ecology is about nature and life. It is about the relationships between living things and their environment. Someone who studies ecology is an ecologist. An ecologist studies living things and is the way they relate to their surroundings. This toad is part of an ecosystem. An ecosystem is like a habitat where an organism lives, but it includes many habitats, plus the non-living systems that support them. In an ecosystem, each living thing depends on other living and non-living things for survival. Insects find shelter and food on trees and in moss. The toad finds those insects and eats them. The toad depends on rainfall to supply a place to lay eggs. One day, maybe a snake will eat the toad. These are the kinds of things ecologists like to think about. I want you to identify on page 2 one relationship ecologists study. The bee is attracted to the flower's bright color. The bee eats the flower's sweet nectar. The flower is also full of pollen. Pollen is a substance that looks like dust. When the bee buzzes off, it carries some of the flower's pollen away on its feet and wings. To make seeds, flowers must share their pollen with other flowers. Flowers do not have hands or feet or any other way to get their pollen to other flowers. So they depend on bees and other insects to spread it for them. The bee needs the flower in order to survive. The flower needs the bee and other insects in order to survive. These are perfect examples of the kind of relationships ecologists like to study. I want you to take 5 seconds and to identify one relationship that ecologists can study from page 4. One that I found is the relationship between the flower and the bee, how the bee needs the flower needs the bee. It's all a process that ends up working together in order to survive. They depend on each other. So that's one kind of a relationship that ecologists would study. Here's another living thing you probably recognize, a squirrel. She is a little surprised to see you. This squirrel does not see people every day. She is not one of those squirrels you see skittering along branches in the park or your backyard. Instead, this squirrel lives deep in the forest. She has a nest of leaves and sticks somewhere way up high in this tree. In the springtime, the mother squirrel shared her nest with her babies, but now it is late summer. The babies have left the nest. The mother has the nest to herself. It is time for her to gather food for the winter. The squirrel's favorite food is acorns, which are nuts from oak trees. In the summer, it is easy for the squirrel to go out and find plenty of acorns, but the squirrel must also gather and save food for winter. In the winter, acorns won't be so easy to find. I wonder why acorns aren't that easy to find in the winter. Can anybody tell me? Oh, right. Everything freezes, dies off. It will eventually grow back. But they have to hoard their food for the winter, especially the animals that hibernate. The squirrel uses her little paws to dig a hole in the ground. She buries an acorn. Over the summer and early fall, she may bury hundreds of them. Then when she gets hungry during the winter, she can crawl out of her nest and go dig up an acorn. It is easy to see how the squirrel depends on the tree. She uses the tree for both food and shelter. However, the squirrel also gives something to the tree. How do you think the squirrel remembers where she buried all those acorns? Can she smell them? Does she put a little stick in the ground to mark each acorn? Does she draw a map on the back of a leaf? Actually, she does not remember where she planted all the acorns. She forgets a lot of them. Many of those acorns will remain in the ground right where she buried them. Acorns are nuts. Nuts are seeds with shells covering them. Like most seeds, acorns need to be planted in order to sprout and grow. Well, the squirrel did the oak tree a favor by planting all those acorns and then forgetting about them. What do you think is going to happen next? She buried the acorns and then she forgot about them, and we know that the acorns are nuts and seeds. And what happens to seeds when we leave them in the ground? You're exactly right. They're going to sprout and they're going to grow new trees. If the acorns weren't buried, they probably would not sprout. It might be eaten by another animal. The squirrel and the oak tree are each doing what they do to survive and produce young. The tree grows leaves and acorns. The squirrel uses the leaves for shelter and the acorns for food. This makes it possible for the squirrel to survive and produce young. Also, because the squirrel buries acorns, the oak tree is able to produce young too. This is how things work in an ecosystem. This is what ecology is all about. So after reading that wonderful chapter about living things and their habitats, we're going to talk a little bit about main idea. We all know what main idea is. It's just the main idea. The main idea is what a text is mostly about. I remember I always told you guys, if you read a Harry Potter story and I said, oh, what's your story about? Well, number one, a Harry Potter book's not this big, okay? And I asked you, oh, what's your book about? Are you going to start from the first word and tell me everything that happens in your book? No, nobody got time for that, okay? You're going to tell me the main idea, what the text is mostly about. It's about a young boy who finds out he has wizard powers, and he goes to a school called Hogwarts, blah, 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 okay? Same for everything else when you see that term, main idea. The main idea is what a text is mostly about. Here are some ways to help us find the main idea. Let's look at the title and the pictures. Sometimes the main idea is in the first and the last sentence, and we've talked about that before, but sometimes you also have to make it up on your own, kind of depending on the text. Look for clue words repeated over and over. Some of our clue words today: ecologist, ecosystem, living thing, habitat, depend on, okay? Now remember, I always told you guys, sometimes you're going to be given answer choices and they might look very, very similar. So right here we have our exit ticket question. What is the main idea of living things and their habitats? I'm going to go over these answer choices, but I'm not going to tell you the answer today because I want you to tell me the answer. So after we go over the questions, I will tell you, I will give you your directions for the next part, and I will tell you when I'm going to answer that question for you. So what is the main idea of living things in their habitats? A, all living things are organisms. B, squirrels and bees are part of an ecosystem. C, living things have a relationship with their habitat and ecosystem, which is studied by ecologists. Or D, living things depend on various parts of their ecosystem to survive. So you can pause the video right now and either answer in the comments if you're on YouTube, or if you're in Schoology, go to our discussion board and tell me your answer, and also tell me why you chose that answer. On Wednesday's video, I will answer this question and give you guys some feedback, okay? I need to see everybody's participation. I love you all. I miss you very much, and I cannot wait to see you again on Wednesday. Bye, guys.